Welcome, everybody, to the Landry Football Podcast. We made it another Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central Time, and we've got another Landry Football Podcast, which we are excited to get to today. Yeah, it's a big football weekend, as every weekend is big football weekend. Not as big of a college slate as it was last week, but we've got some games we'll discuss and latest in the NFL. But this show's about maybe some big picture items that we'll get to. And I want to encourage everyone to join us here on this show. We encourage every show that we do uh, participation with your questions, your comments, your thoughts. Come join us and in the chat room. And the way you do it is just simply if you're listening to this as a podcast, well, it's a little too late, but to join in the chat room, of course. But you can try to make a note that on this show, and you want to get a list of when the shows are, you can go to LandryFootball.com. You'll see follow Chris on Twitch, and you'll see the schedule underneath it. And it'll tell you when we're on live, and you can check us out there. And so it's a great way to become involved, ask your questions, give your comments. Want to hear from you, really do. This is why we do the show live. Want to know who you're a fan of. I want to know what your passion. I want to know what you believe in, and ways that we can help. Maybe make the game of football more enjoyable for you, to provide some insights from a coaching and scouting perspective. Those of you that are new, yeah, my background is as a longtime college football coach, recruiting coordinator, NFL coach, NFL scout, NFL scouting director, um, football administrator. We've got it all for you, and that's what we try to bring for you on these shows. LandryFootball.com is where you can get an even larger sample of what we do in bringing you the insights from the film room on game previews, game recaps, as well as all the inside information of what's going on. Had a trade today in the NFL. You can check on what happened there, and lots of information that we've got on a regular basis. So we encourage you to sign up for the Landry Football Podcast channel. Sign up for go to twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football and sign up there. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few things here. One, I want to talk about what is it that you're looking for in terms of evaluating a college program, an NFL team, a program. There's a difference between a program and a given team in a given year. And we're going to get into some of that. And kind of with that comes into evaluating coaches. Because I get this a lot. We're getting a lot of things about this guy lost this game. He's not getting it done as a coach. And then the guy that was the persona non grata last week is the hero this week. And you make some assumptions, at least those of us in the football business at times, that, hey, look, we know that you don't see the game and maybe don't have the experience and the acumen to understand the game the way we do, but yet there's so much what I would call amateur evaluation of coaches from people who've never done it. People are looking at what they think is a good job or a bad job, and really you're just judging by what happened recently and what's the difference here or there. So we're gonna get into that, and we're gonna get into your questions. I see Jeff Parrott, Kev Belargo has joined us. Appreciate that. But we're going to talk about that and how do you really truly evaluate coaches? Because we have a situation where we've got a big time opening in college football. We may have another one soon. And then I want to talk a little bit about kind of in the college end, what's taken place with the whole transfer portal and what I would classify as the super senior effect, with players getting an extra year, a COVID year, And then, I'm going to get into the Urban Meyer discussion. A lot of people are, and not in the salacious way that people are talking about. Of course, I think that is fair game. He made some decisions that did not fare out well. That's for certain. But one of the things that I want to talk about is the normal procedure when you go on a road trip, the normal expectations for a head coach. Those things I think are really and truly relevant. And so I want to get into that. Talk about coaches who are celebrities now. Um, I want to talk about how they handle that, how they don't handle that. I will give some stories at Senior Bowl and Combine. I'm not going to use names, but just ideas of how things happen and how we're in a different world today. A lot of things that we're going to get. Uh, so that I think is relevant. I'm going to answer your questions, and we're going to answer your questions as we go along. In fact, I want to address a couple here because it's newsy. Jeff Parrott asks, "What are your thoughts on Carolina trading a 6th-round pick for Gilmore from the Patriots?" It was somebody that the Patriots were going to move on from, wasn't going to give a new deal to. So the issue was, let's get something for him. That's the mantra of the Patriots. And so the Panthers got pretty good value. They're going to have to make a decision, but they obviously, the way you make a decision like that is you have a grade on every player in the league. And you not only grade the player, but you assess the situation, the contract, the medicals, everything. And so my thoughts are I understand both sides of it, where it's coming from. Appreciate Kev Belargo cheering us on a few bits. Jeff says, I think Mississippi State AD has done a terrible job with Moorhead and Leach. That's an interesting point. And again, I think you can look at one thing, Jeff. And Jeff, I'm pretty sure I'm right. You're a big Mississippi State fan, so you speak from a state's fan viewpoint, and that's always important to see what a fan thinks and of their team and what their representation is. But this, if you're a state fan, you're well aware that that was a lot of PR reaction to Lane Kiffin and wanting to make a splash. And Mike Leach is a splash hire. Mike Leach is not is what I would call a really good fit. But yet, I think he brings some interesting value, and I think that you're going to see him you make some noise on and off the field. And I think winning last week was a nice win. Remember, he lost. I think there's going to be an inconsistency there. But no, I think some people will see it the same way. Rich Coates asks an interesting question that I want to address about the air raid. He says, exactly what does the air raid work and what makes the air raid different compared to other offenses as well as coaches trying to run it in the NFL? Rich, I may have answered it in the other show earlier today. There's nobody running a true air raid in the NFL. Okay, that's not what the Chiefs are running. It's not what the Cardinals are running. People call it the air raid, like a lot of people would call certain things the West Coast offense, but there's derivatives of it. What the basic concept is, utilizing the short passing game, all the screen concepts in it, which those are basic air raid principles. A lot of spacing at the line of scrimmage. But if you look at the true air raid with Mike Leach and to some degree Graham Harrell has done it at USC, nobody runs the air raid like that. The air raid, the way Mike Leach runs it, has very limited effectiveness if you don't branch out from it, which is why he's kind of been inconsistent with it. I think it was you that asked about Lincoln Riley. Cliff Kingsbury doesn't run they call it the air raid and all that, but the way they run it is completely different. They run the football more. They don't have the line splits quite the same. Their routes are deeper. Their routes are more pre-designed as opposed to the read on the move type. So there's a lot of conceptual differences between what the air raid is called and what it truly is. Why does it work? Well, the same reason anything works. It's not an air raid that works. It's not the West Coast that works. It's attack defenses. What you try to do in an offense, Kansas City runs, for example, the most collegiate look at offense in the NFL. And people say, yeah, they run air raid. They don't run air raid. They run some things that have some tentacles of an air raid, and they will call it. Some people call it air raid. It's not. They run RPOs. They run a lot of different things, but they've got great talent to work with it. Schemes don't win. It's the players within a scheme and the multiplicity of your scheme, your ability to be able to attack defenses in multiple parts of the field. So the basic concept of the RPO, the basic concept of air raids, which are different. RPO is a run pass option. Well, a lot of it is you're basically running option football and you're reading a safety, an end, a linebacker, and you've got a run or a pass option. In air raid systems, you don't have the RPOs in it, but in some offenses where you have RPOs and you throw in some, air raid stuff, you throw in some other elements. You're working a lot of the screen game in a lot of the crossing routes. But the biggest, the unique thing about what Leach's air raid is, it's concepts. He's only got about 11 pass plays, and he's only got about 3 run plays. But every pass play that's called has like a dozen to 15 variables to it. So that's why people say, why he's got such a little small sheet? Because what he calls it, he's just looking. He could, I think he uses just a little sheet. He can put it on a 3x5 index card, depending on how big you want to put the writing. But it doesn't mean it's simplistic, yes, but it's difficult for your receivers. It puts a lot of pressure on your receivers, and that's the biggest, and on your quarterback. But basically, based upon the route called and the pre-snap look and the post-snap look from the coverages, you will completely change your route from one to another. And it becomes very complex. It is difficult to kind of factor in. So those things are important to kind of understand. So I hope that gives you an idea. So absolutely. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get into what I want to talk about today in some of the programs. Let's see. Rock Westfall has a question. Maybe he'll get a better understanding when of evaluating organizations and teams and programs. This will hopefully help you get a better understanding and probably answer your question there. Let's hope it does anyway. I want to get into something that involves the evaluating programs. And we can take it college and NFL. Let's just go from a college standpoint at this point to simplify it, because there's some similarities, but there's some differences. One of the things you have to evaluate with programs, first of all, there's a lot of people that have an understanding or do not have a good understanding of what's truly going on and what's the reality, or people just repeat what they hear and really don't know. When you evaluate a football program, what you have to evaluate is the whole program. You have to evaluate how well is the program being built. For example, you can have bad years. There are ways that you can correct that if you've got a good, solid foundation of what you're doing. If you've got a good recruiting base, you do a good job recruiting and developing. If you have a good overall structure of how you condition and you develop and you coach and you teach, then you have a consistent way of doing it. They're going to be um, a consistent level. That doesn't always mean that you'll win the same amount of games every year, but a consistent way to do it that's going to create a more stable environment in an issue situation. Where people struggle, where fans struggle in many cases, they just look at the result and they say, well, that's all that matters. And you've heard me explain many times, it's not about the result. It's about understanding the process, understanding what's going on behind the curtains. The process creates the result. So there are reasons why you don't have success. There are reasons why you do have success. Um, they're they're not excuses. You have to prepare for situations that will ultimately come up and hurt you. Um, when people ask about programs, what are you asking? Are you looking at historical issues or are you looking at a current issue? Well, there are certain programs that historically may have not put the infrastructure in place, even if they got money to be successful. Some have money, but haven't put it to what I would consider, from a football guy standpoint, proper use to develop. There's some that do that well, but may have hired improperly. You can go out and spend a ton of money and hire the wrong people, and people say, well, how could you lose when you got all that money? Very simply, you hire the wrong people. You pay too much for players and free agents in the NFL. You hire the wrong coaches. It happens all the time. Well, not all the time. It happens more than it should. It does. There's most of the histories you look at coaches that are the wrong coaches and the wrong hires. Let me also say this. Everybody thinks it is difficult to go at a place that doesn't have a lot of success and a lot of resources. And it's not really the case. It's not that difficult to go to a place that doesn't have a history of winning. If you have the support and you have some money, and it programs now and in big conferences, they have a lot of money now that they could put in, comparatively speaking, what they used to 30 years ago. So you can put money into building a stadium, building facilities. And if you have a expectation of, look, you win 7 games a year, 8 games a year, man, that's great. That is not very difficult to do, even at some of the weaker places. We've seen programs that have been really weak. There are 2 ways to do it. Very simple. Schedule easy wins. I've seen programs being built. One of the probably the best program that was ever built from nothing was Kansas State and Bill Snyder. Well, how did he do it? First of all, he went in and he said, we gotta schedule wins. Eastern Illinois, Western Illinois, they would schedule 4 wins a year. And then they'd win a couple of games in the conference. And then, they get to where all of a sudden they're not 0-11. They've won 4 games. Well, that's really good. They just scheduled some easier games that builds a little something. Then you start to use whatever your resources are. For them, it was the junior colleges where they would recruit 2 junior colleges, and then you get a little bit of a better player here, a better player there. But it is not very difficult either in college or the NFL to go from the bottom to competitive. It's really, to me, about just knowing how to do it. What's really difficult is to go somewhere where the expectations are through the roof and you pay a bunch of money and you got to win every year. See, everybody thinks that anybody can do it because Alabama and Nick Saban does it every year. There's a reason why he's considered the best ever, because he's the only guy that does it that way. Alabama under Bear Bryant had a lot of success. Do you realize Alabama that now we didn't have a lot of bowl games back then. Bear Bryant went something like 5 years without going to a bowl game. I mean, he was like 500 for years. Nick Saban hadn't had that. It's unusual for that. Most people are going to have some issues when it comes to being that consistent. Think about it. How good has Clemson been? Really good. Well, they play nobody in the ACC. They're still good. They still have a good program. This year, what the hell's happened? Well, let's take a look at it. I think that they do miss Jeff Scott. I think they've not embraced the transfer portal, which is fine. But if you're going to lose players, draft and whatnot, if you can't get young guys immediately acclimated and you don't get transfer portal guys, then you're going to have a gap. And so in this case, it's just weird to see Clemson kind of, hey, got a couple of losses. They look like they can't find their way. You know, I mean, it's not the same Clemson. Maybe it's a 2-loss, maybe it's 3 losses, but it's not typical Clemson. You know, there's an expectation level where if you don't make the playoffs or win the national championship, it's not a good year. That's virtually impossible to do. Only one team can win the national championship every year. So in the eyes of everybody else, if you fall short of that, you've not done a good job. Whereas if you win 8 games a year, again, you can take a team and a program, schedule correctly, get to 8 out of 12, used to be 7 out of 11, and you could have a job there forever. There are a bunch of people that can go 8-4. That's not that difficult to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's certainly a lot easier than we got to win all the time, every time. So you have to look at what is the program? Where is the program? What are the problems? Why did we have a bad year? What's the fallback? Now, you got programs that are like really high level and expect to win 10 or 11 out of 12, and they fall short of that. You have some that kind of expect to win 8, like we're talking about, and now they win 5. Well, he's doing a bad job. Well, 2 years in a row doing a bad job. Well, maybe they have. Their circumstances. Is it a systemic problem? Is it something that they can correct? A lot of what's happened, and one of the things I'm going to get into is when you evaluate coaches, I think it's really important to understand that. So let's just take something that's really unusual like COVID. Everybody dealt with COVID last year. No one could coach. People think COVID was last year and it doesn't have an effect this year. No, sir. No, ma'am. Yes, it had an effect directly towards last year's team. But remember, with no spring last year, and in some cases less games, and in some cases like Pac-12, really less games, you don't have as much time to practice and develop. And that affects not only last year's team, but what you have coming back. Development is about practice, meetings, workouts, everything that you do. You build one step, like every step up the ladder. So I think what you're seeing is what I'm seeing this year. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it out today is I see certain programs either got what we call the super seniors or the COVID seniors, whatever you want. A lot of those guys came back, and ones that had more of those guys come back, or key transfers. Michigan State and Arkansas come to mind. Big part of their success was transfer portal guys that they plugged in or guys that return that have a lot of experience. That's a great thing for them. It doesn't mean that it is sustainable long term. We shall see. We hopefully, God, please, we don't have to deal with the COVID stoppages again. But one of the things that we are going to deal with is how do you deal with the transfer portal? You may not want to be active in the transfer portal, but the transfer portal may be active on your program. So are you able to take younger guys and develop them a little bit better than if if you can't do that and you can't get transfer portal guys, then you're going to have some problems. So you got, I'll give you an example, two teams that probably Clemson largely has had problems with their offensive line. Um, a lot of people had high expectations for Texas A&M. They've had problems on their offensive lines. In addition to being young, they've had a rash of injuries. And quite frankly, they've not been able to get younger guys enough reps that have stayed healthy enough to develop. And, maybe not in terms of the transfer portal. There's some issues there. Plus, you got a young quarterback. So those are where, do you think a season like that, regardless of what the circumstances are, one bad season doesn't mean that the program's bad. You have to have, in my opinion, you have to have a series of sequential patterns of mistakes, the inability to correct it. Look, being successful in coaching, being successful in football, period, playing, coaching, scouting, administration, it's not about being perfect. No one is perfect. It's about correcting errors, correcting issues. You've got problems on your coaching staff. You got problems with player development. You got problems with whatever. You've got to adapt and adjust. And sometimes the year will get away from you to where your record will not be what people said it would be. It happens. If you do that more often than not, then it's a problem. Now, why do some programs perennially underachieved some people's eyes? Well, I mean, people will look at Texas A&M, Texas with all their money. Neither one of them made great success. Texas won a national championship with Vince Young and Mac Brown not too long ago. I know a lot of people think it's a long time ago. For me, time's kind of quick, but a lot of money, you don't win. Well, just because you have the money, just because you have the resources, doesn't mean that you utilize all those resources well. I know that's one of the things that you hear a lot about. Well, Alabama has all those advantages because they make a lot of money and they have a lot of people. Well, they've created that advantage. They've worked it, but they also have hired well and utilized those people on certain projects. And a lot of that takes time. And a lot of that you learn. It's a bit of learn and go. And just because you're going to make a lot of money doesn't mean that you're going to get them all right. Over history, over time, you can't look and say, well, like for example, where I went to school and coached, LSU. Look, people look at it and say for 20 years, we've now had 3 coaches there win national championships. And 2 of them are not what I would call great coaches, but they had resources and they hit things right. Now, in my opinion, Ed and some staff members really hit on a few key transfers, mainly Joe Burrow, and good job of recruiting and really putting a good staff that meshed together, part of which Ed inherited, some of what a little thingy that dropped off here. Some of what he put together, and it worked very well for a year. But you see, there's no consistency with that. And so, therefore, there's a pattern. So there's a problem within the program. There's a problem behind the curtain, as I like to call it. Those are issues. When you have that, that's when you know things have got to change. The results often are not there, but the process says things are going well. And if you're patient, then things start to get turned around. LSU, prior to Nick Saban getting there, it was, look, Coach McClendon was there for 17 years. It's a different era. He replaced Coach Dietzel, who won a national title in late 1950s. Coach McClendon was basically kind of pushed out the door because he couldn't beat Alabama, and they went through a revolving door of coaches. I worked for Coach Orangebarger, and he wasn't a great recruiter, but he's a really good coach. Some short-term success, but nothing sustainable. And he left. Mike Archer and Curly Holman and Jerry Donato. And, well, I got resources, not as much resources as you don't. Why can't you win there? What's the problem? Because if you look at it, what have they won at LSU? They hadn't won since the late 1950s. Nothing. Now they hire the right guy, Nick Saban, and they have the right administration that said, we are going to support all the efforts. We're going to put the right infrastructure in place, but the right guy making the right decisions to utilize that money worked. Saban did it. It was well. I think, don't want to take a shot at Les. I think the infrastructure was so good when Nick left that Les inherited something that was what I would call a turnkey house. I mean, everything was done, and I thought Les did a pretty good job, but the longer he got control of the program, the more some of the frayed edges start to come apart, and then it became less and less of an elite program. Still all the resources, but he wasn't as good at it. So, and then, you put Ed Orgeron, and it's kind of, again, some success, but not consistency. So the answer is you got to have the resources, but you got to have the right hires. And if you see over time, like right now, a guy that gets criticized a lot is Kirby Smart. And he's going to get grilled if he doesn't win the national championship this year. Why? Hell, who's to say it's likely going to be them or Alabama. Now, if Kirby loses 2 games and he doesn't make it, then I think, at this stage, you really, the program's in great shape. But now you've got years and years of, okay, look, you trip up in this game. It becomes difficult to kind of explain away. But the stability of the program is there, even though he hadn't won a title. They hadn't won a title in Georgia since 1980. That's a blue blood program. It's an elite state with recruits. There's not anybody that has a better program right now behind the curtains, how they do it, why they do it, than Georgia, other than Alabama. They haven't won it all. You sit there and say, well, people will crucify. Do whatever you want. It's from a football standpoint, football people think, well, that's the dumbest thing ever because they're in really good shape. Others win, but it's not sustainable. If you ask me, and I said this in 2019. I said it publicly. LSU, Georgia. Who has the best program? In 2019, not today. It was Georgia. Landry, you're an idiot. LSU had one of the best teams ever. No. I didn't say who had the best team in 2019. Who had the best football program? There were flaws even in LSU's how they were doing things that were eventually going to catch up to them. Okay, a doctor will tell you that your blood pressure's up, your cholesterol's high. Just because you didn't have a heart attack today doesn't mean you're not headed towards one. They know that because they know the signs, they're trained, they see it. When Philip Fulmer won a national championship at Florida, did radio with my friend Bill King in Nashville for a long time, and that thing started to unravel the very off season after they won the national championship. What did I see? Everybody, this is great. Philip, he's their guy. He's a former Tennessee player. It's great. And they had a lot of good games and some good seasons after that. Had another chance with another potential trip to the national championship. It's okay. You're not going to win them all. But you see the gradual erosion of the program. Why? The details would take too long on this show. But you could see it behind the scenes what was going on, even though the regression was a little bit slower in terms of the results. So sometimes good is not as good as you think behind the scenes. Sometimes what is a bad year is not necessarily a sign that things are bad for the future. That will determine over time, and you can correct it. What I worry about is if you don't have people that know how to correct it and don't know what to do, then you got a problem. So if you're a doctor, you talk to your patient, you know what to do. If you can get them to understand and you trust that patient's going to eat right, exercise, and do that, you got a better chance of having success. If you don't do that, then you know you got some problems potentially with that patient. That's how I look at things from an overall organizational, overall program standpoint. So, yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea. The one thing that in evaluating coaches is understanding who does what in the staff and understanding why you're successful, why you're not successful, and how you can fix it. And then the ability to know how to fix it. Those things are paramount because it's not about if you got things that need to be fixed, but how you fix it. Those are things that we'll look at a lot when doing a complete evaluation of the program. One of the things that I wanted to mention, we're in a new era, as I mentioned, with transfer portal. And it is something that you're going to have to adjust to. And I don't think everybody has the answers because it's new. Transfer portal sounds great. Put an experienced guy in. It works. Similar situation, you put a guy in, it doesn't work. Why? It's not as simple as you might see. What's the player? What's the position? What's your scheme? What's the background of the player? What's his ability to learn and experience in that? If you're coming from a similar system, one of the things, Amante Te'o goes from Tennessee to Alabama. Well, Alabama's a great program, so around a lot of good players. Yeah, I get that. Aside from that, why is it a good fit? Monte Te'o was recruited and played under Jeremy Pruitt's defense, who is running most of what Nick Saban runs because he taught Jeremy the defense. So you're getting a guy that's got experience and understanding and all the checks. So he comes in, it's a seamless transition. Monte Te'o goes somewhere else that, okay, not as good a program, but it's a completely different style. Look, he was quote unquote going to Ohio State. Now that's a perfect example because that's a talented team, talented program. He goes to Ohio State. Well, Ohio State's got linebacker problems. He would help. He wouldn't be as productive. I mean, he would run around, he'd make plays, he'd make tackles, but he wouldn't be as productive because that defense is a completely different defense. I'm not saying he can't learn it, but it wouldn't be as seamless. It wouldn't be as natural for him. Those things are really important to understand when you're evaluating a player either through the draft. Recruiting is more of you're getting somebody you got to develop anyway. But in the transfer portal, that's going to be key. It's not just, well, we're going to bring guys in the transfer portal. You need to bring in the right guys just like you do in recruiting. So I think that's going to be important in the process of fixing your program. Because let's say you don't believe in the transfer portal. You don't want to do that. You want to recruit your guys and keep your guys. Well, that's great. Dabo Swinney has said, I don't want any part of the transfer portal. Okay. But if you lose guys, if Lynn J. Dixon leaves, okay, so you have to have younger guys that you have to get ready quicker because you've got Lynn J. Dixon, you've got Will Shipley, and so now the progression of getting the younger guys up to speed is now different. And you may not be interested in bringing in somebody, but if in this day and age, players are I'm going to go somewhere, and if I don't get the starting job or I'm not where I think I should be, I'm going somewhere else. Then you've got to be able to replenish that. You don't have to do it in the transfer portal, but you better be able to have it on your roster or you're going to have a gap. You're going to be missing a key player or two or three at a certain position. Those things I think are going to be important. Is it the entire reason why a Clemson's having an issue? I think it's a part of it. How do they deal with it? Don't know. I mean, going forward, what they decide to do, I don't know. How you improve upon it, don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. You may not do it, but others may do it to their benefit. Like, for example, Arkansas A&M. Arkansas's got a better team this year than A&M. Now, on the surface, it would be very smart to say, wait a minute. Sam Pittman is second year at Arkansas. Jimbo Fisher is in his fourth year at A&M. How does that happen? It's a fair criticism, and it's a fair point. What's the difference? The biggest difference with Arkansas, look at the 3 transfers on the defensive line. Look at the guys that came back at safety. Look at the offensive line returning. They've got some key pieces. They got a better team this year. Does that mean that Arkansas has a better football program than A&M? Absolutely not. We don't know that. We're going to find that out. 1 year doesn't determine that. I mean, you can't say that the program's better because they won 1 game. Last year, A&M's program was better. Well, A&M had a better team, and Sam was in his first year. So it's apples to oranges. Now, if you were to say 3-4 years from now, if the same thing applies, then you got something. Because then you got a program that's going, say, one direction that is consistently good, what we're talking about. Then you got another that, not it's leveling out. It's not as good, or it's getting better, or it's getting worse. That will play out. Now, from an evaluation standpoint, you got to see, are there signs there that are showing you, this is spiraling downward. And for me, and I can't be everywhere, okay? So I basically know what I know, and there are things I don't know, and what I don't know, okay? But peeking behind the curtains, I know that there are problems at one place where I think there probably needs to be changes. Then there's problems at another place that I don't think there needs to be changes. I think there needs to be changes on maybe some of the things they're doing, or need more time to do exactly what they're currently doing. And those are different fixes, right? I mean, that's the best way to look at it. I want to get into something else, and I see a bunch of you joining us in the chat room. I'm definitely going to get back to that. But I want to get into something that has been a topic, and I think there's a bigger picture here that I like to address, and it's about the Urban Meyer situation. No, I don't want to talk about the hot blonde and where Urban's hands were, and what everybody thinks of him. Think about him whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. He's not a popular guy. He's not a well-liked guy, and he's done something that's embarrassing himself, his family, and his organization. And I want to address a couple of things that just procedural, though. From a pro coach standpoint, a head coaching standpoint, it is, to say highly unusual is an understatement. I can't really come up with any examples where a head coach doesn't accompany his team back from a road game. I have let players, due to like an illness in the family, or during a bye week, maybe, another circumstance that might allow a player to leave. But as a coach, you go as a team, play a game, win or lose, you get on a plane, you're sitting in that front seat, and you're looking at your players in the eye, and it's a symbolic that you're there with them. It's symbolic that win or lose, we're in this together. I think that's probably, from a organizational structure standpoint, was most concerning. Now, we think about how he acted and all that. Look, my thoughts on that are, you tell your players, don't do anything to embarrass yourself, your family, your organization, or the city that you represent. How the hell are you going to do that as a coach? That's double for a coach or an administrator. How the hell are you going to have your players be held to a standard when you can't do it yourself? That's really disturbing. And it's a shame. And it's embarrassing in the coaching profession. I do want to take a step back and say, why do, and let me just mention this too. In college, you always want to go back with the team as well. Um, there have been some occasions that are a little bit unusual that an assistant coach, maybe in rare cases, a head coach might stay behind or go to a recruit's home, not usually that night, but sometimes that night if you can get a visit, if it's a day game or whatever, or the first thing the next morning. Because you're making an in-home visit and you say, man, I saw that guy on TV last night. He's in my home having coffee with us. Sometimes you may do that. It's usually an assistant coach. Usually wanted a head coach in college to go back with his team as well. But sometimes you'll have an assistant go on the road recruiting. I know you probably have all heard the story about Marshall and the plane crash in 1970, but the only guy that survived that whole situation was an assistant coach. And it was that assistant coach that didn't get on that team plane back home because he went recruiting. Tragic story, and that will happen sometimes. I know that in my case, as a personnel guy in the NFL, I would very often I would not go on the team plane because I was scouting, but I wasn't the head coach is responsible for the team being there. I was responsible for acquired personnel and organizing everything. So often I would, you're in Ohio and I'm at an Ohio State game and I'm driving down to Cincinnati, or I might be in Kansas and I might fly in and get in at 2 a.m, and I'm there for the game. But that's different. You're part of the team, but you have a role that's different, and being with the players is not it. So that's a little bit of a difference in college and pro. But I do want to, before I get to your questions, and I appreciate your patience, I want to talk a little bit about just the general perception of coaches. And I've learned this in doing a lot of coaching search and coaching evaluation work over the years. Coaches, as you well know, like a lot of players, have become celebrities. They're seen on TV, the mugshots. And I've known coaches that enjoy being a coach more than they enjoy coaching, meaning they enjoy the celebrity of it. They love the money, of course. They love those things. It's a wrong way to get in the business because folks that do that and said, if you go with the idea of doing it for money, you go with the idea of doing it for celebrity, you're going to want to use that celebrity / power for things that are unscrupulous, immoral, not what you really want to be involved in, or you don't want to be caught doing. I see it a lot. So what happened to Urban Meyer is he got caught on video. It's embarrassing. There is no way I would even attempt or want to minimize that in any way. I will tell you that you'd probably be very disappointed to know that a lot of your favorite coaches out there over the years have been naughty boys, have done things pretty similar to what you saw. You just happened to see it in an era where you can't go anywhere. You're 1 second away from being on camera at all times. So being caught in a situation like that is stupid. And even for somebody drunk or having a few pops in them, it's a stupid thing to do. He's not alone. It doesn't make it any less reprehensible, but it's happened before. And the reason I bring it out, not to minimize what he did, but to emphasize that we see more of this, and I think we're going to see more and more, not more of this getting caught on camera, but we see the general authority person that uses that power for urges, for pleasure. I've seen it a lot. I've seen it a lot with being out at the Senior Bowl, being at the Combine, going out to dinner with coaches. Similar things happen right in front of me. I've seen a lot of things happen. I've seen situations that there was a very successful coach that one of their assistants, his reward for his players, his position group, was to pay for hookers once a week. There's a lot of stuff that goes on at the pro level. There's a lot of things that go on, recruiting and just a lot of things that are not real savory. And so this is not like it happens a lot. It happens more than it ever should. And it doesn't minimize any one person that does it. What happens today is you can deny that, and you will never know about a lot of those things. I've seen a bunch. There's a whole lot I didn't see because I don't know what was happening in my neighbor's house or anything else. But stuff happens. To me, though, it goes to the character of the individual. Are you in it for the right reason? It is no problem to be a really good coach and want to get paid the highest level of money for what you do, the going rate. But if you get into it for that, you get into it for the power, then what are you using that power for? Is it good? Is it bad? Think about that. That is something that just came into my mind because when I saw what happened with Irvin, my mind flashed back to similar things that I've seen with a lot of people over time before there was even cell phones. And today I'm wondering, gosh, if you ever do that, you're an idiot because you're just a snap button from being caught. So, look, I don't know why I felt the need to say it other than I just think that you wonder the ego, the power, is that what draws to you to being a coach? I know for me, until I start talking with you guys on forums like this, 99% of my work is done behind the scenes, and I love it. I'm kind of a boring person. Never married, work at football 365 days a year. I love the minutia of football. I don't like the stuff that a lot of people like to talk about. I like the football. I like the evaluating of coaches and players and teams and schemes and evaluation of programs. And I get frustrated sometimes when you get these amateur. I'd have no problem with people asking questions, none at all. I get a little bit annoyed when people are know-it-alls and think they know who can coach and who can't and what's what when they really don't know. Not even a tenth of the story, much less the whole story, nor do they know how to evaluate or those things. So I get a little bit annoyed with that, but I like the behind the scenes stuff. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I say this not in defense of Urban, quite the opposite. That to me concerns me that why he would exercise in that behavior. And it makes me wonder how much does he really want to coach versus being the power of coaching and the money that comes with that feeds the ego and all of that. I don't know. That's a rhetorical question. I don't know. Only he can answer that. It's only in his heart. But it's only in any coach's heart to decide what their reason is for doing what they do and why they do it. Let's get to your mailbag, the mailbag questions. Let's see what you have. Let's see. Wow, we got a whole bunch of lots of good ones here. Let's see. Answer the air raid. Tony, hi Tony, how are you? Do you think Fields is ready, or are they hurting his career rooting for him as a Buckeye fan? Look, what you have to do with Justin Fields, Bears are going to start him if you hadn't heard. You got to have a package for him, and you got to build him slowly. Look, we don't know if they're hurting his career or not. It's what they do with him that'll determine whether they're helping or hurting him. He's got to play at some point. Only they know the right time to put him in, put a package, so that they've got to give him the best chance to succeed and build from that. Do you think the Wildcat formation is not good anymore? Every time you see it, it goes nowhere. A Wildcat formation, first of all, it's very rarely used. It is not, there is no, I hear people who say, what about the Wildcat offense? There never was a Wildcat offense. The most it's ever been used was the Dolphins used it 1 year. It was 5.8% of their offensive snaps. It's a direct snap. It has some unique intrinsic value here or there, but no, it's not something you want on a consistent basis, no. What was your scouting evaluation of Joey Browner out of USC and Jay Novacek out of Wyoming? Joey Browner was a big-time strong safety that played like a linebacker in a day where it was run first and was great. Jay Novacek was a great pass-catching receiver out of Wyoming. Didn't run all that well, but was really good. Let's see here. We went over the Jimbo stuff with for Rock. Let's see. I want to know what you're hearing from inside the McLennan facility in Baton Rouge. There's a lot of negativity, and look, part of that's going to probably have to be a little bit careful what I say. But look, it's pretty clear what is likely going to happen unless there's a unbelievable run that no one sees in this LSU team. So I think it's, I've said it for some time since September that this is only a matter of time. I heard a rumor that if Cam is going to Pittsburgh, Cam would certainly be someone that they would consider, I would think, in working out. I don't know that there's anything to that. How much does location matter for a program? I think location matters a lot. Obviously the reason why the South has such success is because the corridor of the players located where there are a lot of programs that are good, it has a huge factor in it. Do you think Urban makes it through the season? I don't know, Tony. I don't know. I really don't. How much does fan base pressure factor into athletic director's decision to move on from it? A lot. The apathetic view from fans. Fans don't show up for games. Ticket sales, all those things have a negative effect. That's really tough. In fact, an apathetic view probably hurts you more than just a negative, passionate booing, so to speak. Which defense do you trust more in the Oklahoma-Texas game? Oh, by far Oklahoma. Texas's defense is struggling even worse right now. Let's see here. Anyway, we got, let's see here. And is your GM building a new team? Would you take Chubb or Henry? It depends on what type of offense I run. I take Derrick Henry. Wear and tear might be would be the only reason Chubb a little bit younger. But as far as school programs, what was Iowa as a football program before Kurt Ferentz became head coach? Outstanding. Hayden Fry was an outstanding coach. Did a tremendous job. He was the guy that turned the program around. Iowa was a really good program in the 50s and even before. It had great, coaches and good programs, but it fell on the hard times. It was Hayden Fry that came. He's at SMU in North Texas, and he went up to Iowa and he built that Iowa program, and it was Kurt was part of that staff. Bill Snyder was part of that staff. Barry Alvarez is part of that staff. Just on and on and on. Great, great staff. So it was a really, really good program. So, all right, I appreciate that. Let's see. That will do it for today. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Always good to have you talking football inside the film room. A reminder that we'll have SEC football and beyond tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central. So appreciate you joining us. And remember, check out LandryFootball.com. All the game previews up. Appreciate everybody that's joined us. Hope you have a great evening, everybody. So long.